everyone, and welcome to Pollinator Live, a distance learning adventure. My name is Tamberly Conway, and I work for the U.S. Forest Service. We manage approximately 200 million acres of national forest and grasslands throughout the nation. That's about the size of Texas. Now, I'll be your host for today's webcast here at the Smithsonian National Zoo in Washington, D.C. And we really thank the zoo for having us here today. We're so glad that all of you could join us, and thousands of students are watching this webcast from around the globe, and we welcome you all. Bienvenidos a Polinizadores en Vivo, una aventura al aprendizaje a distancia. Si quieren ver este programa en español, por favor, oprime el botón en la pantalla. Y así se puede ver más sobre los polinizadores y cómo podemos ayudar a ellos. Now we have a short welcome message from our USDA Forest Service Associate Chief, Hank Cashton.
I'm Hank Cashton, Associate Chief of the United States Forest Service, and I'm here with my two favorite buddies to welcome you to Pollinator Live. When I was a boy, I was fascinated by the pollinators that flew from flower to flower, and I was a little frightened of the pollinating bees that buzzed around me to get to those flowers. But pollinators are more than just bees. They also include other insects, such as butterflies, or other animals, such as hummingbirds and bats. Did you know that pollinators provide us with one of every 3 bites of food that we eat? By learning and understanding pollinators and their habitat, all of us can help provide more places for them to do their work, to be healthy, to be productive, and be able to provide us with a healthy environment and plenty of good, tasty food. Helping pollinators to work and live in the natural world is an important part of the job we do here at the Forest Service, as we work to make our water cleaner, our soil healthier, and our air easier to breathe. Pollinators need things to pollinate, and one of the best things you can do is plant a garden. Having a backyard, schoolyard, or community garden like the People's Garden we have here at the Agriculture Department in Washington, D.C. can also improve your health. Kids who garden are more likely to eat healthy foods and actually like their fruits and actually like their vegetables. When I was a young boy growing up in Los Angeles, my mom encouraged me to have my own garden. It was relaxing, it was good exercise, and a lot of fun. And I got to eat the fruits, and I actually liked the vegetables from my own garden. Gardening's a great way to get outdoors, whether you live in a very large city or a small town. And a garden is a great place to do some research of your own and be a pollinator scientist. Pollinator Live is going to show you how. The USDA Forest Service is proud to help bring you today's program, and Smokey and Woodsy and I are glad you could buzz in to join us and hope you will also buzz in during future Pollinator Live programs. Thanks, Woodsy, thanks, Smokey, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Associate Chief Cashton, for that welcome and for your support. Pollinator Live is encouraging students and adults to get outside, learn about pollinators, plant gardens, and conduct research to help scientists understand what we can do to help pollinators. Last year, we featured monarch butterflies and followed their migration throughout the school year, and that was called Monarch Live. Today, we're continuing this distance learning adventure with Pollinator Live. To find out more information about pollinators, how you can help your environment, learn more about gardening, and help scientists conduct research, you can go to the web address on your screen. Now, many people come to the zoo to see exotic animals, but the National Zoo is also home to many local or native species. We're webcasting right now from an area called the Zoo in Your Backyard. So if you look closely at any garden in your backyard, in your schoolyard, or around your home, you're going to find it's actually a zoo out there. There are a huge variety of pollinators and other insects right under your nose. So you don't have to go to Africa or Asia. You can just look closely around you, which is what we're going to be doing today here with Pollinator Live. So we hope that you'll stay with us throughout the day to learn about pollinators. But if you can't be with us the whole day, just please drop in to watch some of the segments. Now, you'll be able to watch all of these segments later at the web address on your screen. Now, the schedule today might have a little bit of time difference, but don't worry, your time zones might be different. So, at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, we're going to get an overview of pollination. Then, at 11:45, we're going to learn about pollinators as our partners. At 12:30, we're going to explain how you can go on a bee hunt and contribute to real science studies. Then at 1:15, we'll get the latest research about monarch butterflies. Then at 2 o'clock, we're going to learn what we can all do and what you can do to help pollinators. So we hope that you can join us for either one or all of the programs. Also, today we're going to answer many of your emails. So if you'll buzz in and send those questions to the address on your screen, we'll answer some of those today. Now this is what we'll be learning today. First, we'll learn what a pollinator is and how pollination works. Then we'll learn why pollination is so important to all of us and also to wildlife. Next, we'll all learn how to become citizen scientists and help researchers around the world. Next, we'll get an update on monarch butterflies. And finally, we're going to all learn how to attract and help pollinators. Now, before we start this program, we want to show you how we're bringing this program to you today. We're bringing this webcast to you using the very latest technology. We call this an electronic field trip or a learning excursion. We really wish you all could be here today and learn in person, but using this technology, you can be here with us today. Now, we're going to see a roll-in about how this webcast is produced.
What does it take to do a webcast?
It takes hundreds and hundreds, not even thousands, of feet of cable to produce this webcast. You can see a lot of cabling here: audio cable, video cable, communications cable, power cable. 500 feet plus of power cable just to power this production vehicle.
It takes cameras. We got 3 Sony PD-170s, 1 Sony robotic camera, and a crew to operate them.
It takes lots and lots of audio, and I'm using 8 wireless audio systems for the show, including wireless comms, handheld wireless mics, clip-on lavalier microphones, lots and lots of them.
All right, another thing you need to produce a good quality webcast is a good quality internet connection. And when you're on a remote site, you do not have broadband, good high quality internet, so then you go satellite. You can go anywhere in the world with a satellite and have internet access.
A switcher. We need a digital switcher to switch between our camera sources, our tape decks, and it's the source of our graphics.
Roll-ins, lots and lots of roll-ins that take lots and lots of time to produce ahead of time.
All right, we have 2 computers here. One is encoding English and one is encoding Spanish for the webcast. This console right here allows me to monitor and watch the feeds as we're transmitting them via the internet to you.
And that's what it takes to do a webcast.
Wow, that was really interesting to see what happens behind the scenes to create a webcast. Now it's time to learn about pollination and how pollination works. So today we have an expert, Mrs. Donna Stockton-Ing, who is an animal keeper here at the zoo. So, Donna, do you take care of lions and elephants?
No, actually I take care of invertebrates, which are animals without backbones. They represent about 98% of all animals on Earth.
Well, I hear that you're a pollination expert.
Not so much an expert, but I did study in school an insect that was really attracted to pollen in the cornfields.
Well, I hear you're going to tell us about pollination.
There's a lot to learn.
All
So,
right.
well, everyone, pollination is very important in the life cycle of a plant. It's how flowering plants reproduce and create new seeds and fruit so that new plants can be grown. Now, there are over 400,000 species of flowering plants that require pollination to reproduce. They're as different as impatiens and orchids and watermelon and all kinds of different fruits. So let's take a look at some plant parts and see how pollination is accomplished. Right here, the stamen is the male part of the flower. It has a filament and an anther. An anther is where the pollen is produced. On the female part of the flower, it's called the pistil. The pistil includes the stigma, the style, and the ovary. When pollen from another plant lands on the stigma, it grows a long tube down to the ovule. Once the ovule is fertilized, it produces a seed. Now, in the case where you see obvious fruit, that's just the ripened ovary. Now, pollination looks pretty simple, but sometimes it can get a bit complicated. If you're a plant, you're basically rooted to one spot. You have to figure out how to get your pollen to another plant so that you can produce seeds and fruit. So plants enlisted the help of natural mechanisms such as wind and water and animal pollinators. So let's take a look at some grasses and trees. They produce millions of pollen grains for every female part of the flower. They do a lot of hard work to get their pollen where it needs to go. Let's take a look at these trees and see how they're pollinating. Now notice only a few pollen grains are actually making it to each tree. A lot gets wasted on the ground. So when you produce millions of pollen grains, it really is hard to get that part fertilized. Now aquatic plants have the same problem. They depend on water to get their pollen where it needs to go, and sometimes that just doesn't happen too fast. It's a good thing that 80% of flowering plants use animal pollinators to get their pollen where it needs to go. Animal pollinators help the plant where they don't have to produce as much pollen to reproduce. They also can produce pollen in smaller quantities, can be larger, and they make it sticky and spiky so it can actually stick to their pollinator that's pollinating them. Let's take a look and see how this bee is actually helping the flowers pollinate. Now, wasn't that quick? Pollinators save plants a lot of time and a lot of energy when they actually get pollination done. Now let's take a look at the pollen grain itself. Pollen grains are very microscopic. That means they're really small. They tend to be also very textured and spiky. This causes us to sneeze and itch when we breathe it in and get it on our skin. But the pollen grain on the inside only lasts for about a few hours to a few weeks. Whereas the pollen grain on the outside is very hard. It's called sporopollenin, and that can last for thousands of years. Scientists have found pollen grains way back in the Jurassic period, and that's about 150 million years ago. From these pollen grain fossils, we can tell which plants lasted or lived way long time ago. Now, the pollen grain itself comes in yellow and reds and oranges or hues of blues and green, but they can also be an important food resource for pollinators. Sometimes pollinators need a lot of protein, so have some bee. It's a very hungry bee. Here, you can have this. Now, plants make a great effort to attract pollinators to them. They come in all kinds of colors and shapes and sizes, and there you go. Can you go around the back? They advertise like this. They say, "I smell good and I have sweet nectar." Take a look at this bee. Wow, isn't that kind of cool? So pollinators such as butterflies have big flat flowers because they can land on it and stick their noses in and rest while they eat. Whereas pollinators like hummingbirds have long tubular flowers where they can stick their bills in and actually still fly while they eat. Now these pollen advertisements or plant advertisements cost these plants a lot of energy, but it's worth it for getting all your pollen to the right spot in the right amount of time. Bees and butterflies and other pollinators have found a mutual relationship with their plants so that bees can get the necessary food they need and the plant can actually get the pollen to the right place at the right time. Now let's meet a few of those pollinators. Butterflies are very important pollinators. They have beautiful long wings. They have a long nose that gets way into the plant, and then they actually get pollen on the tip of their proboscis. When they do this, they visit another flower and they'll stick that proboscis into the plant and the plant gets pollinated. Now they're not great as pollinators as bees because they like to sit on the edge of the flower. Now bees are great pollinators. They're fuzzy, they have lots of hair, they pick up a lot of pollen. They even have special features on their legs that are curved so they can pack all the pollen in. They're called pollen baskets. Now because bees visit so many flowers in a certain amount of time, they are the best pollinators and they're the driving force of pollination. Flies. Flies are very frequent visitors to flowers. They actually look like bees for the most part, but if you look real close, you see that flies have short antennae and very big wings. Now, flies aren't as hairy as bees, but they visit a lot of flowers, and there's a ton of flies out there, so they make great pollinators as well. Now, beetles are a diverse group of insects. They're coming long and short and round and fat, and they just get to a lot of pollinators. They get their whole body in because they're really hairy. Hummingbirds have colorful wings and very long bills, so they like to get their nose all the way in the flower. And because hummingbirds are so busy and they require a lot of nectar, they really feed frequently. They get pollen around to where it needs to be. Now, bats are our nighttime pollinators, and along with moths, they love sweet, fragrant things because bats don't really use their vision at night. They use their sense of smell. They love flowers that are big and white and purple and green. Now, we've met a lot of pollinators, and there's really a lot more out there, like ants and crickets, and in other countries there's monkeys and things like that. But now that we've learned so much about these pollinators and how important they are to the ecosystem, let's go learn some more. Back to you, Tamberly.
Thank you, Donna, for that fun and exciting pollination explanation. You know, it's really interesting, but why should we care? And why does it exactly matter? Well, to answer that question for us today, we have with us Alan Peters, who's the curator of invertebrates at the Smithsonian National Zoo. But today, he's better known as the master chef of Pollinator Cafe.
Wow, welcome to Pollinator Cafe, where we celebrate pollination. And that is done by serving foods that are pollinated by animals. Do you know why you should care about pollination? The bee knows. Have you ever stopped to smell the flowers? Have you ever enjoyed a juicy strawberry? Have you ever taken advantage of the vegetables that are available to you, or the spices and the taste? Well, let me tell you a secret. The bee knows this, so you best know. Do you know that it is estimated that 1 out of every 3 bites of the food that comes to your table is a result of pollination? There are all kinds of partnerships that grow out of pollination and food webs. In fact, a healthy human diet requires at least 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day. This is important. Just like your body has different parts that function together to make the body work well, so your diet. You need various foods for the diet to nourish you and make it work. Pollination is a big business. The U.S. economy has about $10 billion a year associated with just pollination, and $2 to $3 billion of that is associated with native bees. So, think about it. How many pollinated foods have you eaten or used today? So, think about it. Are you ready? Here we go. Welcome to Pollinator Cafe. We have a special today, in fact 2 specials. Number 1 is World Without Pollinators, and second is World with Pollinators.
Who cares? He's staying. I don't like vegetables. We'll take it in 1.
Is that so? Wow. We need 1 order of pollinator without pollinators, please. Thank you. Here you go, sir.
Ew! Dry moldy bread and water?
That's right. Without pollinators, your choices are pretty slim. And not only you, many other creatures just aren't going to make it and survive without it.
I'll take item number 2. We're
Excellent choice. We'll take one order of World with pollinators. Thank you. Here you go, mademoiselle. We have a special today. Strawberries and blueberries and watermelon and pineapple. And if there are any blueberries left, you'll be able to eat them. As well as a garnish of cucumbers and peppers and kiwis and grapes. So, can you imagine dinner without pollinators? Which plate would you rather have? Not only you, but all the other animals that rely on these foods need this food. So the food web will fall apart without them. Does pollinators matter? Do we need to help pollinators stick around? The answer should be coming clear. What do you say?
I like pollinators. They feed on flowers and then pollinate the next plant by carrying the pollen stuck to them. The result is fertilized flowers with all kinds of yummy fruits and vegetables. Without these insects, we won't have strawberries and avocados and so much more. In addition, our economy is very dependent on the money and jobs that agriculture generates. I have changed my mind. I choose worlds with pollinators. I read about what you can do to protect pollinators. You can plant plants that pollinators use and pour a little less concrete. You can also physically remove pests or use other insects to eat the plant pests. And use less pesticide. Pollinators matter
to us all. Thank you for visiting Pollinator Cafe, where we celebrate pollination. Back to you, Tamberly.
Thank you so much for explaining why pollination is so important. And now it's time to take some questions. So remember to buzz in and send your questions in at any time to the email address on your screen. We have some questions that are coming in from the different schools out there who are watching Pollinator Live. So let's see what they have to ask. Thank you very much. Now, this first question is from third graders at Christ the King Catholic School in Chicago, from Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Foreman's classes. They say, you talked about what would happen if we don't have pollinators for our crops. Could you expand on what effect that will have on our food supply?
I'll take that question. Actually, what happens is any system that is in place and you remove parts of it, then that system begins to collapse. So when you hear about oranges in Florida that don't produce because of cold, it's not actually something that physically happens to the plant. It is a matter of the yield of the pollination. The pollinators don't really fly when it's so cold, and as a result you don't get as much oranges and the price goes up, and it has all kinds of cascading effects.
Thank you very much. Now, this next question is from Mrs. Guichard's class at Mountain View Elementary in Haymarket, Virginia. Their question is, how can a tiny pollen grain make a long tube during fertilization?
Actually, the pollen grain is actually an active cell. So when it actually gets to where it has to be, it gets stimulated to start growing. And when it starts growing that long tube, it gets where it needs to be. That's actually when fertilization takes place. So the pollen grain is actually alive, and it has to get where it's going really fast. Remember I said it can only live a few hours to a few weeks. So depending on the pollen grain, it's got to get where it's going so it can start growing and do what it has to do.
Thank you. Now, we have some more questions. Thank you very much. All right, here's one from Farmington High School in Farmington, New Mexico. Their question is, can we attract pollinators without scaring people about being stung?
Yeah, we can. For the most part, most people think of the big stingers, which actually end up being wasps. Most bees are really about getting food and feeding their offspring. So they don't really care about us. They've got a mission. They need to feed their babies, and they get off doing that, and they do it pretty well. The wasps are the ones that are a little more aggressive. They've got to get a job done, but they have a big hive to go take care of, and they're not as friendly as bees are. But for the most part, if you're looking at your flowers and plants, you're seeing a lot of bees hanging around, and they don't want anything to do with us. They just want to do their jobs and keep on going.
Thank you very much, Donna. And another question from Mrs. G's class at Mountain View Elementary in Haymarket, Virginia. So, does water or rain ruin pollination?
Not always. Sometimes water can actually help pollen get where it needs to go. However, for us, it helps us because we can breathe better when all the pollen is knocked down on the ground. So it doesn't ruin it. It can actually stimulate the trees. When the trees absorb the water in the ground, they feel healthier. And sometimes that next day after the rain, we get a lot more pollen than we actually want to see. So it's actually good for the trees when it gets watered.
Great, thank you. Now we have one more question from Nottingham Elementary in Arlington, Virginia. How many different types of pollen are there?
Remember I said there's about 400,000 species of flowering plants. So probably around that and many different more. And each plant's pollen, sometimes they look really similar, but sometimes they can be very different. So there's 400,000 types of pollen or different types of pollen, but actually some of them share a common shape and size.
And for our last question, Ms. Rose Goss class at Mountain View Haymark, Virginia asks, what would happen if bees and other insects weren't able to pollinate?
Well, one thing that would happen is, as we talked about, we wouldn't have the fruits and vegetables that are available to us. It would affect the honey that is available. It would be all kinds of things that we need to have to survive.
Yeah.
It's really important, all of this pollination and how we can help pollinators. And so we thank all of the schools out there for asking these questions, and we want you to keep on buzzing in to continue to send in those questions. So now it's time to wrap up this segment, and we thank all of you for being here and helping us out with that question and answer. Now continue to buzz in with those email questions and send them to the web address on your screen. Also, teachers and all of the adults that are out there, please go to the web address and fill out your online evaluation because your feedback is extremely important to us. Also, those that fill out a survey will receive a pollinator poster that's really beautiful. Also, we're going to plant one milkweed plant for every survey that we get back. And we will plant that milkweed plant in a local school here in Washington, D.C., or one of our USDA People's Gardens. Also, we're going to enter your names in to win some great prizes from the Forest Service. We'll have 10 respondents that will be randomly selected, and you'll receive a wonderful gift of incredible Forest Service, Smoky Bear, Woodsy Owl, and pollinator materials, and some seeds so you can plant your own garden. So, as well, one of the things we can all do to help pollinators is to plant gardens. So don't forget about those $500 garden grants. So if you will, go onto your web screen and apply for those garden grants. Now please stay with us because we're going to be back in 15 minutes to learn about pollinator partners. Dr. Sean Brady and Mr. Nate Irwin are going to be here with us from the Smithsonian Institution's Insect Zoo to talk about pollinator partners, show us some of their really cool tools, and they'll show us a roll-in of their entomarium and their insect collection. So we're going to take a break, and you'll see some fun things while you're waiting, but we hope you can buzz back to join us again in 15 minutes. This is Tamberly buzzing out for Pollinator Live.